Gojo Satoru and Naruto Uzumaki are two of the most popular characters in shonen manga. The reason why that is the case differs of course, but we can agree that these two characters are considered to be one of the strongest in their respective universes. So a battle of this kind was inevitable. But who'd actually win? You see, crossverse scaling can be difficult and complicated if you want it to be, but the opposite can also be true. In this case, I'm going to make it as simple as possible, which means employing crossverse equalization. That way, techniques such as domain expansions, cursed techniques, and even something like genjutsu would work just as intended. So in essence, chakra and curse energy is pretty much the same thing. That way we can focus on the actual stats of the characters and how their techniques would interact in this hypothetical. Now, as with any versus battle, the most important factor will be the base stats of each character. That is because regardless of whatever technique the user possesses, they must be able to damage their opponent with said technique for it to be effective, which of course requires attack potency and speed. Now, to scale Naruto's attack potency, I'm not going to go through the entire manga to do any building to city level calcs because that would just be a waste of time. We can just fast forward to later feats in the war, where Naruto, just in KCM2, was able to easily barehand 5 Biju bombs that went on to vaporize multiple large mountains. It implies that Naruto at this point scales far above that level of power, which makes sense given the databook statement which says sealed inside Naruto is a powerful force that could easily turn the world to ash. And even if you want to interpret this statement as simply destroying the surface of the planet and not the planet itself, there's also this statement in Databook 4 which says, when the beast's chakra seeds, the earth quivers and the heavens shake, earth-shattering destructive power. This is very consistent with Boruto's V-Jump issue which outright states that Kurama's Biju bomb can even blow up the planet. And though one can argue that this is referring to adult Naruto who is stronger than teen Naruto, the statement seems to be referring to Kurama's Biju bomb itself, by saying it's a deadly ninjutsu caused by an enormous tailed beast. It's a consistent frame of reference when it comes to his power throughout multiple databooks and databases. It makes sense as to why Naruto can easily cut the god tree in half, despite the size of its trunk far exceeding any mountain range. That too without entering his strongest form. There's also the fact that this structure isn't just an ordinary mountain or tree for that matter, it's the god tree, a portion of the Ten Tails that's also reinforced by its chakra and that of the other Biju. So this isn't a mere large mountain level feat when it comes to attack potency, it far exceeds it. The same applies to him casually vaporizing Madara's Chibaku Tensei meteors, some of which scale to the size of the Divine Tree trunk, which as I said far exceeded the size of any mountain range. I mean, the Ten Tails itself, even prior to absorbing the chakra of half the Nine Tails, was noted to possess planetary levels of chakra, which was gradually expanding. This of course doesn't mean that the Ten Tails can exert planetary levels of attack potency, especially given the mechanic established in Naruto where tail beasts aren't able to truly focus their energy, which is why Jinchurikis are typically stronger than the Biju themselves. Though in the case of the Ten Tails, it obviously can, given its feats overpowering the Nine Tails, which means its attack potency also scales to planetary levels. This is very important when it comes to Madara being the Ten Tails Jinchuriki because not only does he have the planetary levels of chakra the Ten Tails displayed, he also now has an additional half of the Nine Tails that he took from Naruto. Yet Naruto, after receiving an additional amp from Hagoromo, physically knocks back this Jinchuriki Madara, who first wonders if it's because he hasn't finished healing as yet, but then says no, his power is suddenly growing. Naruto then proceeds to not just cut the god tree in half but also rip open Madara's body and sends him flying into the base of the tree. This then brings up a very popular form of analysis that goes back to Newton's third law of motion, which states that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, which in this case means that since Madara has planetary level attack potency, he must also be able to withstand the same force that he's able to exert. Some might use this to upscale Naruto's attack potency to planetary, but it's not really necessary and it's also not incredible. You see, when it comes to using Newton's law of motion in fictional debates, it requires a bit of nuance. For example, a character having planetary levels of attack potency doesn't mean that they also have planetary levels of durability. That is because there is a big difference between striking strength and attack potency. Attack potency represents the amount of energy an attack carries or the tier of damage a character can inflict, while striking strength is strictly physical. It measures how much energy a character can deliver through a physical blow, such as a punch or kick. Now, striking strength is a form of attack potency. If you can punch a planet to dust, then you have planetary striking strength and planetary attack potency. But attack potency isn't always striking strength. For example, if a wizard casts a spell that blows up a mountain, they have mountain level attack potency. However, that same wizard can punch you in the face and it might only hurt as much as a normal human punch. So in this case, their striking strength is merely human level, but their magic can produce attacks that scale above their striking strength. This is very important to understand because it highlights the truth of fictional power scaling, which is that Newton's third law doesn't always apply to attack potency. There are cases where a character might be able to withstand the force of their attacks, but you also have cases where they might not, which means their durability doesn't scale to their attack potency, which also means that someone being able to damage them doesn't scale that person to their attack potency. This, by the way, is also consistent in Naruto as well. For example, Sasuke wasn't able to breach Gaara's sand shield using his striking strength, but he was able to using the attack potency of Chidori. This means Sasuke's attack potency scales above his striking strength, which is where Newton's third law more so applies. Another example of this would be Naruto being damaged by his own Rasen Shuriken, or the third Raikage's durability being bypassed by his own attack by simply falling on it. There's also the example of Madara's own body being destroyed by the meteors he himself pulled from outer space. And that isn't even the most extreme example of this, because there's also 8 Gates Guy. He was able to bend space and nearly kill Madara in his 10,000 Jinchuriki form with a single kick, but the force of the kick shattered the bones in Guy's own leg completely. His body literally crumbles into ash because it cannot handle the heat and stress of his own power output. The same can even be said for Sasuke's Kirin. Itachi survives, but only because he summons the Susanoo to tank it for him. What this means is that if Itachi had taken the hit with his physical body, he would have been vaporized. His own offensive powers such as Amaterasu or Susanoo is massive, but his physical body is actually quite frail. So it is pretty clear that durability doesn't automatically scale to one's attack potency. So simply upscaling a character's attack potency to planetary because they damage someone that has planetary attack potency is flawed logic. You must first be able to prove that the character also has planetary levels of durability to use that kind of scaling. This can only be done if a character tanks the attack of someone confirmed to have planetary attack potency, or if they tank the destruction of a planet, outside of an actual statement, that is. Now, the reason why I went through the trouble of explaining this is Naruto's supposed upscale versus Kaguya. Some believe that based on Naruto being able to damage Kaguya means that he scales upwards of planetary, which gets into some crazy territory. So first I'm going to explain where Kaguya scales, and then we can get into whether Naruto has equivalent levels of power. Now, you often hear people claim that because Kaguya or Momoshiki created a dimension, they must be universal level. But when you actually look at the translation of the lore and the physics shown in universe, that interpretation doesn't really hold up. And it all goes back to why time-space in Naruto is almost certainly a pocket dimension, not an infinite universe. First, we have to look at the Japanese term used in the manga and databooks, Jikukan. This word translates to time-space. It describes the nature of the location, a place that possesses its own time and spatial coordinates separate from the main world. Crucially, the word time-space doesn't indicate size. It's distinct from the word uchu, universe. In the context of the Naruto manga, creating a time-space is less like creating a Big Bang. and more like partitioning off a section of reality. The best way to understand this is with the box analogy. Think of the main Naruto universe as a giant room. When a character creates a time space, they aren't building a new house. They're building a cardboard box inside or just outside that room. This is also true for Obito's Kamui. His dimension is a time space, but it's mostly empty, just a void with some concrete blocks. It's obviously not a universe, it's a finite storage unit. It also has a light source that shines from above, given the shadow positions on the cubes, and also because everyone can see while inside. Kaguya did the same thing, just on a bigger scale. Her box contains a planet, a moon, and based on the background art in some cases, a star. This makes Kaguya's feat either star to solar system level, but it doesn't prove that the space itself is a universe. We actually have text from the novels that supports the idea that these dimensions are finite containers. There's this line from Naruto's battle with Momoshiki in his world that says, "It is leaking out beyond the parallel world he constructed." This phrasing is very important. If a dimension can leak into the main world, it implies that it acts like a balloon or pressurized container with a defined edge or barrier. It isn't the same as a universe. So, what does this mean for power scaling? It means that unless a character is explicitly stated to have created a universe, we should default to viewing these time spaces as pocket dimensions. They're finite bubbles of reality, usually the size of a planet or solar system, that exists alongside the main universe. Thus, why they refer to them as parallel dimensions. These are impressive feats of creation, likely star to solar system levels of energy, but they aren't proof of universal power. So what this means is that Kaguya is likely at least star to solar system level, given her ability to create multiple pocket dimensions with planets, moons, and stars. She's also able to destroy them using her expansive Tsuchiga orb. And while this does have a hacks component to it as well, given its ability to destroy what it touches with dust release, she would still need at least the chakra quantity to expand it to a solar system wide level. Keep in mind that this is also dependent on how big the solar system is, but at least one of her dimensions was shown to have multiple planets, so it does depend. In any case, Kaguya scales to star level at the very least. Now this was important to understand because some upscale Naruto based on his feats versus Kaguya. So if Naruto was able to damage Kaguya and Kaguya scales between star to solar system level, that must also mean that Naruto scales to that level as well. Now the main problem with this argument obviously is the fact that durability doesn't inherently scale to attack potency, as I explained before. But you also have other issues as well. For one, Kaguya was only able to achieve this after absorbing the chakra of the planet and the people stuck within infinite Tsukiyomi. Black Zetsu outright states that she's exponentially faster and stronger than before, and this was the second time she did it. In fact, Kaguya post-absorption casually outsped Naruto and Sasuke multiple times, and was only sealed because of Kamui and her forgetting about Sakura. So Naruto by the end of the manga doesn't even scale to the version of Kaguya that was going to destroy her time space to even scale Naruto to that power level. In fact, it's consistently shown that even a far weaker version of Kaguya was superior to Naruto in both speed and attack potency. Whether it was their chakra clash where Naruto was easily overpowered once Kaguya started to exhibit a tiny bit of effort while Naruto was of course going all out the entire time, or when she combed through him and his shadow clones without breaking a sweat. She was so fast that between the moment Sasuke teleported next to her and launched his Chidori, she was able to switch to a different dimension and then physically evade him. She was also able to one-shot his perfect Susanoo not just once, but twice. Now Naruto was able to land a few hits on Kaguya, once when he surprised her by using the Tail Beast Kekkei Genkai to amp his strength and speed, another when she was caught off guard using the reverse harem jutsu, and then towards the end when he was briefly mentally amped after Obito died. The problem is that these are what we call outliers, where Kaguya was either outsmarted, underestimated his power when he received a temporary buff she didn't expect. In fact, Naruto attacked Kaguya moments after this using 9 Rasen Shurikens infused with the powers of all 9 Biju, and she pretty much tanked all of them and only had a few scratches to show for it. This is pretty much what's known as the guard is down weakness. Some characters like for example Goku in Resurrection F do possess above planetary level durability, but only when they're actively blocking or using ki to strengthen their durability to maximum level in the moment. So they can get damaged by something weaker, like for example a common laser gun, if they aren't prepared for it. Though if I was to grade Kaguya's actual durability, it is around planetary levels, because she was able to tank Naruto's Rasen Shurikens with minimum damages. So 6 parts Naruto is pretty much below Kaguya in most attributes, including chakra levels, since Kaguya was not only stated to have stronger chakra than the Ten Tails, but far greater chakra than three-eyed God Tree Jubidara. Sasuke couldn't even believe that such a person existed, which means that Naruto doesn't scale to that level. So to close off, Naruto's attack potency is around planet 2 large planet level. You could even argue that his durability, at least in his 6 parts KCM cloak, scales to around planetary levels as well, given his ability to tank Sasuke's Chidori to his face, which makes sense since he's essentially cloaked within the energy that powers his attack potency, similar to the Susanoo. Though one could always argue that Sasuke wasn't at full power and neither was Naruto, so that feat is simply unquantifiable. It is up to you. With that said, what about his speed? Well, we first need to distinguish between 3 things: travel speed, combat speed, and reaction speed. These are not the same. Travel speed refers to the sustained velocity a character can maintain over a distance, for example running from point A to point B. Combat speed is the velocity of physical limb movement and short-range displacement during combat. This refers to any form of physical movement or attacks being launched. Now, reaction speed is the ability to perceive an incoming threat and initiate a neural response. In other words, your synaptic firing rates. So one's reaction speed can sometimes be roughly relative to your physical combat speed, and sometimes it can be much faster. This can be influenced by certain techniques, a form that provides enhanced perception, or one simply having faster synapses. It is very important to keep this in mind, because it's very relevant throughout this section of the video. Now when it comes to speed in Naruto, it is very linear. Take for example the hidden sound ninja Zaku from part 1. His jutsu, known as Slicing Sound Wave, is composed of air pressure and supersonic waves. Yet in chapter 56, Sasuke, in a very weakened state, physically dodges this blast while carrying 2 people. For Sasuke to move that mass out of the blast range after it was fired implies a burst speed significantly higher than Mach 1. Then we have the famous Haku light speed statement from the first databook that says Haku moves at light speed inside his mirrors. This, however, is often misinterpreted. If Haku had light speed combat speed, he would have vaporized Naruto and Sasuke instantly, which clearly didn't happen. The correct interpretation is that Haku's travel speed, which is turning into a reflection and moving from mirror A to mirror B, is light speed. However, his attack speed, such as stepping out to throw a needle, is significantly slower, allowing Sasuke to track him and Naruto to grab him. Now as for the great Rock Lee, when he drops his weights, he moves fast enough to bypass Gaara's automated sand shield. In the Forest of Death, that same sand reacted to explosions. For Lee to blitz that defense, he's pushing into high hypersonic ranges, likely Mach 10 to Mach 20. We then see the biggest jump in Shippuden with Sasuke's Kirin. This is our golden standard because we have a hard time frame given by Zetsu. After first seeing Sasuke's Kirin, he states that lightning strikes in 1 millisecond. If we assume a standard cloud height of 5,000 meters, the velocity is 5 million meters per second. That is roughly Mach 14,000. This proves that lightning speed in Naruto is not light speed. Light moves at 300 million meters per second. Kirin is only 1.6% the speed of light. Since Itachi reacts to this while blind and even exhausted, the reaction threshold for Kage level characters is massively hypersonic plus or Mach 14,000 plus. Keep in mind that this is not the same as combat speed. It just means that Itachi is able to perceive this attack and activate his Susanoo, which doesn't require physical movement. Next up is the 4th Raikage's near light speed statement. The dialogue uses the phrase Hikari no Gotoki, which translates to speed like light. So when Naruto in KCM1 dodges the Raikage's fastest punch, that is when he gets into the relativistic tier, likely 10 to 50% the speed of light. He is fast but not faster than light just yet. We first hit true light speed at the end of the manga. Madara's Sage Art Light Fang is outright stated to cut all things with the speed of light. In chapter 674, Naruto dodges this beam from inches away. Even if one argues that he aim dodged the initial firing, the beam sweeps towards him and he ducks under it. To dodge a light speed attack at that distance requires one to possess reactions and short burst movement relative to the speed of light. So by the end of the manga, Naruto doesn't just have light speed reaction feats, but he's also a light speed combatant, which encompasses short burst movements. Now as for Jujutsu Kaisen, one of the most critical pieces of evidence for speed scaling comes from the Culling Games, specifically the fight between Maki Zenin and Curse Spirit Naoya. In chapter 197, Naoya accelerates to Mach 3. This wasn't a throwaway line. The story treats this speed as an overwhelming level of velocity that even upgraded sorcerers struggle to track. If the characters were consistently moving at light speed or even lightning speed, an attack at Mach 3 would be statistically insignificant. It would seem as if it was frozen in place. So the fact that Gege presents Mach 3 as a major threat establishes a soft cap for travel speed in the verse, at least at that point in time. Sukuna was later able to perception blitz that same Maki, which implies that his travel speed is likely beyond Mach 3. Now top tier fighters like Maki and Toji possess a surface intuition that allows them to sense changes in air density and temperature. This effectively gives them precognition, allowing them to dodge attacks that move faster than they do. Similarly, sorcerers can read the spark of cursed energy to predict an opponent's move before it happens. So while Maki herself isn't faster than Mach 3 Naoya in terms of travel speed, as seen by him lapping her multiple times even while she's in a full sprint, she's still able to predict where he's going to be and adjust based on that trajectory, which is why he wasn't able to touch her. So most characters, even special grades, are likely moving in the subsonic to supersonic range. Now as I said before, travel speed isn't that relevant when it comes to versus battles, but I wanted to address this Maki scaling before we get into what really matters. The best argument for light speed comes from chapter 237, where Kashimo uses mythical beast Amber to fire electromagnetic waves at Sukuna. And since EM waves travel at the speed of light and Sukuna dodges them, this implies that Sukuna is faster than light when it comes to combat and reaction speeds. Now some have argued against this by suggesting that this is a case of aim dodging. Sukuna simply reacted to the spark of curse energy or the movement of Kashimo's hand before the attack is fired. There is also the fact that just prior to this, Sukuna was tagged by a sonic scream, which of course travels at the speed of sound. So if Sukuna was truly faster than light, sound waves would be effectively frozen to him. These of course are good arguments, but they're pretty much contradicted just a chapter later, when Sukuna reacted to the same EM wave attack after it was launched. We see that Kashimo first fires the attack, it's already en route to Sukuna, but he's able to cast his enchantment, raise his hand to his head, and launch Dismantle, all before the attack actually reaches him. This is, of course, far beyond aim dodging. He's exhibiting not just perceptive, but also physical movement faster than an attack going at light speed. Now, it is important to contextualize this because the first time he dodged the attack was likely aim dodging, which makes sense since he was in a far weaker state due to the damages sustained during his battle with Gojo, to the point that he gets pummeled by Kashimo in this state, whereas the opposite happens once he completed his transformation and healed his body. That explains why he's now able to easily perceive and react to an attack that surprised him earlier. Also, him getting hit by a sound speed attack isn't a contradiction to his light speed feat, because if the argument is that Sukuna aim dodged a light speed attack at point blank range, he should have been able to do that to an attack that moves at the speed of sound as well. So the obvious answer here is that Sukuna didn't dodge the attack because he didn't think he needed to, which turned out to be true since he suffered virtually zero damage from it. With that in mind, it is important to note that this Sukuna is far weaker than the one that fought Gojo. His curse energy quantity dropped to around Yuta's level, despite being around double the amount during his fight with Gojo. His cursed energy output and reinforcement was also drastically lower as well, which is why his slashes were far weaker. This was then made worse by the attacks he blocked from Yuji, which lowered his output even further since they targeted the boundary between Sukuna's and Megumi's soul. This is very important because output and reinforcement determines strength and speed, which means this Sukuna, despite being in his true form, is weaker and slower than the version that fought Gojo. And if this version, at least the one that fought Kashimo, is a light speed combatant, then that means the one that fought Gojo is around that level as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's much faster, since there's an arbitrary limit to how much output can affect your physical movement, but at the very least, Sukuna at full power is a light speed combatant. Now that context is important for Gojo since he's consistently shown to be faster than Sukuna, especially when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. This is sometimes aided by his curse technique Blue, which he uses to compress space, effectively creating negative distance. So by the end of the manga, Gojo not only has light speed reaction feats, but he's also a light speed combatant, which encompasses short burst movements. Now JJK is a bit harder to scale when it comes to attack potency because there isn't a statement outright saying that a character can blow up a planet, so we have to use destructive feats, which isn't an accurate gauge when it comes to attack potency since a character's destructive capacity can be lower than their attack potency. So keep that in mind while scaling these characters. Now to get a somewhat accurate idea of where Gojo scales, let's just skip to the special grade sorcerers and even the disaster curses such as Jogo, who by the way was easily able to destroy an equivalent area to a small town using his maximum meteor technique. It was also stated in the guidebook that it's a meteor capable of rendering an entire town to cinder, so there's not much debate there. We also have Sukuna himself being able to destroy everything within a 140 meter radius back in Shibuya using his domain, which by the way would actually be 200 meters if he didn't narrow it down to protect Megumi. So this obviously scales Sukuna from large town to small city level long before he was even at full power, since this version of him only had 15 of his 20 fingers. Then again, the radius he was able to cover isn't really an accurate display of his power level since it didn't increase along with his power. So the 200 meter radius is more so a feature of the ability, and it's possible that he could do more damage if the radius itself wasn't limited. That then brings us to Gojo, who would of course by virtue of being the strongest, at least at that point in time, would scale above anything I mentioned before, which at the very least puts him above city level. Though some would argue that when taking domains into the equation, which is referred to as the pinnacle of Jujutsu, one could even get characters such as Dagon and Jogo to mountain level since they were able to create mountains within their domains. This argument of course is a bit far-fetched because of the power to manipulate space granted by barrier techniques. So while a domain is created by the cursed energy of the user, the space within the domain doesn't equate to the amount of power the user has. So Dagon doesn't scale to island level because he was able to create a space similar to an island within his domain. especially since Jogo scales above Dagon and he only created a mountain. So using this faulty logic of domain space equates to power output, that would scale Dagon massively above Jogo, which doesn't make sense. It's even stated that the concrete manifestations of innate domains don't have special meaning or function. In other words, they might as well not exist. This of course lines up with this statement, which refers to domains as a mental landscape, which does boost the stats of the user dependent on environmental factors. So Jogo gets a boost from volcanic mountains because he was born due to the fear of volcanic eruptions, and Dagon spawns an island with an open sea because he was born due to the fear of water-based natural disasters. That's all these domains represent, and the space within them along with what's inside them is purely based on what the user's ability is based on, rather than their power output. So in closing on this point, the domains of disaster curses doesn't scale them to mountain or island level. So that also means that we can't use those feats to scale Gojo to above those levels. Now there's also this statement where one of the US soldiers claims that Gojo could power a nation, which people use to scale him to country level. But this more so has to do with his nigh infinite amounts of cursed energy. That is due to the power of his 6 eyes, which makes the cursed energy he expends infinitesimally close to zero, regardless of output. So it's not that Gojo has country level attack potency, which refers to the amount of damage he can inflict in one hit, but more so that his 6 eyes grants him the ability to produce more while consuming less energy, thus not running out. So this statement also doesn't scale Gojo to island or country level in attack potency. Now what about planetary? Well, there's the infamous black hole feat by Yuki, which Kenjaku said could have destroyed the world. This seems pretty straightforward, since if Yuki scales to planetary, Gojo must also scale above planetary since he's stated as the strongest sorcerer of the modern era. But the problem is that this also requires a bit of context. Yuki's power called Star Rage pretty much allows her to continually add virtual mass to her body. This then increases the weight of her punches, thus causing more damages to her opponents. Now the cool thing about this is that the increased mass doesn't affect the sorcerer, which is why her speed doesn't decrease due to the increased mass. It also doesn't increase her durability or tensile strength, as Kenjaku pointed out. So it's pretty much only virtual mass the user can use to increase the weight of attacks dealt to their opponents. Now where this gets a bit interesting is when Yuki goes on to state that it's true that Star Rage's alterations in mass doesn't affect her, but only up to a certain density. This then led to Yuki adding enough mass to her body that she collapsed into an actual black hole, capable of destroying the planet. This of course led everyone to believe that Yuki has planetary attack potency, but that isn't really the case. That is because the black hole itself isn't a technique per se. It was instead the result of Yuki adding enough virtual mass to herself that she collapsed into a singularity. So while the result is planetary destruction, it is a chain reaction caused by physics, not an energy value she can output with a punch or beam, thus not being Yuki's actual attack potency. It's the same as Yorozu's True Sphere, which is technically the most lethal attack in Jujutsu Kaisen, possessing infinite attack potency because of its physics-based exploits. So in essence, there isn't any real evidence of characters having planetary attack potency in JJK, aside from the statement that says Sukuna could be a world-ending threat, which doesn't actually mean he can blow up the planet, but instead end all life on it, similar to the one we interpreted about the Ninetales turning the world to ash. The difference here is that Kurama also has additional statements confirming that he can actually blow up a planet. Also, based on what we've seen so far, at least in Gojo's fight versus Sukuna, Gojo's strongest attack is at best large city level, based on the damage caused by Gojo's 200% Hollow Purple, which is the strongest attack he has ever used. Now I'm not saying that Gojo didn't blow up a planet so he isn't planet level. What I'm saying is that he isn't planet level because he simply hasn't displayed planet level attack potency, and there's nothing implying he's at that level. Now, based on what we've gathered, both Naruto and Gojo are light speed combatants, meaning they possess light speed, reaction, and combat ability. The major difference between them is that Naruto by the end of his manga is upwards of planetary, while Gojo's attack potency is around large city and at best mountain level. Now this doesn't mean that Naruto would outright win, since the JJK verse and characters like Gojo are a bit tricky. You see, Gojo's curse technique, known as Limitless, when in its neutral state, allows Gojo to create an infinite amount of space between himself and everything else. So for the most part, Gojo can't be touched or damaged by anything. Now just so we're clear, this isn't a barrier that can be broken through sheer might. Gojo is able to surround himself with space itself. That space is then divided into halves, fourths, eighths, and continues in perpetuity. So it might seem as if you're being stopped, but you're actually moving very slowly across an infinite amount of space. So it doesn't matter how fast or strong Naruto is, he just isn't touching Gojo. Or at least that's what many believe. You see, there's a way for Naruto to bypass infinity, and it all goes back to his TSO. These orbs are composed of all 5 basic chakra natures, plus yin-yang release. And because of this, they have the ability to nullify all ninjutsu. Gojo's infinity is a product of his cursed technique. Under verse equalization equating chakra to cursed energy, the limitless technique would function as a ninjutsu. So while Gojo's technique manipulates space to create infinite distance, the TSO have been shown to interact with and destroy space itself, as seen with Kaguya's expansive TSO. Furthermore, they function by nullifying the energy maintaining a technique. So if a TSO touches the outer layer of Gojo's barrier, it would neutralize the cursed energy fueling the spatial distortion, causing the infinite distance to collapse and allowing an attack to reach him. It's the same logic behind Toji's inverted sphere, which was able to bypass infinity by interacting with that energy. So Naruto could use his TSO as an explosion fueled by his attack potency, which would bypass infinity and destroy Gojo in pretty much one hit. Or he could just use it to destroy the upper body of Gojo, similar to what Obito did to the third Hokage. Or he could also turn it into one of those footholds and recreate Gojo's death by slicing him in half. That is because Naruto has the ability to mold his TSO to whatever shape he pleases, which includes a staff he can use to bypass Gojo's infinity instead of using his punches that can't do it. Now this isn't going to be easy because Gojo's combat speed is relative to Naruto's based on what we've established. So it really comes down to whether Naruto can quickly strategize with some clones or ninja tactics, which is one of those things that comes down to whether the writer wants it to happen rather than being something that will happen. There's also the Tail Beast Kekkei Genkai, which he uses to unquantifiably boost his stats in an instant, which could allow him to clear whatever speed relativity he shares with Gojo at least for a brief moment, and that would be enough to destroy him. Now when it comes to Gojo, his one and only win condition is Infinite Void. He does have the ability to create negative space from using blue, which is also an application of his Limitless Curse technique. This pretty much creates a pulling force within the negative space as reality tries to fill the gap that Gojo created. Though when used offensively, the attack potency and speed of this power wouldn't do much to Naruto since Toji and Sukuna were able to tank red, which is even more powerful than blue. By the way, red is the reversed version of blue, so to put it simply, it repels instead of attracting. Both of these abilities are inferior to purple, which is the combination of both red and blue. This was initially thought to possess durability negation and existence erasure due to possessing imaginary mass, but based on Sukuna being able to tank it multiple times even while amped to 200%, that doesn't appear to be the case. Along with taking into account the effect that it had on the surrounding, this more so falls in line with a destructive force than one that erases mass. So given where this technique scaled in attack potency, which is large city level at best, it likely wouldn't be able to kill Naruto even if he took a direct hit. This of course again is assuming that Naruto's durability, at least in his KCM cloak, scales to his attack potency since he was able to tank Sasuke's Chidori to his face. So the one chance Gojo has at defeating Naruto is his domain expansion, known as Infinite Void. If Naruto gets caught in this, he would be instantly paralyzed and his brain would be filled with infinite amounts of information. Every second you spend inside the domain equates to 2.5 years of info flooding into your brain all at once. So Gojo can choose to fry Naruto's brain until he dies, or he can just kill him while he's incapacitated, which means he wouldn't be able to reinforce his durability. Now one option Naruto has is to not get caught in the first place, by using his precognitive danger sense to react to the expansion of the domain itself and leave before it closes. Domain expansions aren't instant. They involve a barrier physically expanding to trap the target. So Naruto can simply use body flicker to escape before getting caught. I would say that this is assuming that Naruto is 100% on point and aware of what's going on, and chooses to escape the attack instead of trying to tank it. So this is also one of those things that can go either way, and it depends on who the writer wants to win. There's also the overpowered substitution jutsu that Kishimoto had to simply stop using because it was too broken, so Naruto can simply swap with a trunk or something, or however that works. Though I think the most logical option would be for Naruto to shield himself using TSO. He can simply form a defensive shell, similar to what Obito did to protect himself from the Ten Tails Biju Bomb. So by wrapping himself inside the sphere of a TSO, Naruto creates a space where the short hit effect of Gojo's domain expansion is nullified upon contact with the shell. The stream of information is a projection of cursed energy. The TSOs would neutralize that energy, carrying the effect, effectively creating a superior version of a simple domain. And since Gojo doesn't have the attack potency to breach Naruto's TSO, his Infinite Void would fail every time. While of course Naruto has multiple TSOs which he can use to defend himself and also attack Gojo at the same time. Now assuming Naruto does get hit for whatever reason, there's also the Kurama factor. Unlike Genjutsu which disrupts chakra flow, Unlimited Void causes physical brain damage by flooding the mind with infinite information. Even if Kurama jolts Naruto awake, the stream is still active, and Naruto would still get stunned again a microsecond later. The thing is, Kurama is a separate consciousness. Even if Naruto's brain is overloaded and stalled for some reason, the consciousness of the Nine Tails should remain active within Naruto's body. Kurama could then simply control Naruto's body and use the Biju mode to attack Gojo or break the domain itself from the inside, essentially acting like an autopilot while the pilot is unconscious. What I'm saying is that the moment Naruto is hit, Kurama reacts to this by protecting Naruto using his TSOs, goes on to heal whatever damage is done in that split second, and then Naruto never gets caught again by the attack simply because he's prepared for it. So while Gojo does have a win con, Naruto has multiple counters to that win con, and it really just depends on if the writer wants Naruto or Gojo to win. It could go either way. Now I'd say that Naruto wins 10 times out of 10, but that's if we maximize the abilities of each character while ignoring characterization. Though with characterization in mind, it's more so 7 to 8 out of 10. It is really Naruto's battle to lose. With that said, that is it for the video. I do realize that the video is way too long and it shouldn't have been this long, but I really wanted to explain how I got to my conclusion, which required me to explain and try to address all the counter arguments. Or maybe I did miss a few, and if I did, you guys can let me know in the comment section. And also, if you guys liked the video, remember to drop a like. And also let me know if you guys want to see more videos just like this one. But yeah, with that said, I'll see you guys soon. Peace.